Welcome back, everyone. I'm so excited to kick us off on our first stop tonight, sports media. No longer do television broadcasts and print newspapers dominate the sports media landscape. The seismic shift towards social media and digital streaming has provided unprecedented coverage for fans and access to athletes and teams, transforming the industry like never before. It is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator tonight, Prem Siripapat, a graduate of Duke's Trinity College in 2003, former standout on the Duke women's tennis team, former anchor and host at ESPN, and current PhD student at Fordham University. Prem, we're so happy to have you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Caitlin, and shout out to tennis players, by the way. But you are right. Today's sports media landscape has changed tremendously, especially over the last year as a result of the pandemic. And our two panelists today, you know what, I'm going to go out on a limb and say these two, they have all the answers, not only to the past and present, but also to the future, at least when it comes to sports media. And guys, I hope that's not putting too much pressure on you, but we have Zack Weiner, the co-founder and president of Overtime, a very successful sports startup. And we have TJ Adeshola, the head of US sports for Twitter. So gentlemen, welcome. And if you could just take a couple minutes to introduce yourself and talk a little bit more about your current role. So Zack, let's start with you.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Thank you for having me. Prem, very nice to meet you. I've been really getting into tennis these days during COVID, so get me a fan. And TJ, what's up? I think this is probably the fourth or fifth panel we've done together. Always fun to be on one with you. But cool. I'll give a little bit of background on me. I was born and raised in New York City, and then I went to Penn. And when I was there, I started a company called the Sports Quotient, which was a site focused on sports analytics, where had hundreds of college students, including many at Duke, writing about sports, doing podcasts, creating video series. Was really fun. Ran that for 5 years, and then a little while after, joined Endeavor, the talent agency. And just after that, founded Overtime with my co-founder, Dan Porter. Our first investors were Graycroft, David Stern, and a few others that just really believed in the macro opportunity around creating a next generation community, brand, content company around sports. And it's been an amazing ride over the past 4.5 years. We have 120 employees based in Brooklyn, New York. And honestly, we're just getting started, which is the most fun part.
Fantastic. Good stuff. Love the tennis. And this is your fourth panel together, guys. You guys are like family members at this point. All right, TJ, go ahead.
Yeah, Zach, we need to keep the road show going. I only wore a hoodie for the record because I just swore Zach was going to wear an Overtime hoodie. So I'm shocked.
I'm actually in Miami, so it's Overtime t-shirt instead.
Oh.
That was the shameless plug we discussed before the panel. I hope it worked well. TJ Adeshola, the head of US Sports at Twitter. I work alongside an amazing team that really works with the best sports properties in the space, including Overtime, to accomplish 4 things. One is to support their day-to-day needs. They may be rolling out a new handle. They may have issues with account support, right? We support them on a day-to-day basis. 2 is there are hundreds of millions of people on Twitter, so we help them leverage the power of that scale to reach distributed audiences. 3 is monetization. Y'all know this, programming 365 days out of the year for any social channel is a lot of hard work. As a result, sports properties are actively looking for opportunities to find a way to monetize and generate revenue off of those efforts. And then the last bucket is innovation, which is where we get to do really cool stuff. Like at the Super Bowl, we threw tweets on confetti, right? So those are the 4 primary pillars that our team works across to support publishers across the sports landscape. Prior to Twitter, I was at ESPN. I started as an intern. I finessed my way to getting an internship at ESPN, which we can speak about a bit later. But yeah, that's the TJ story.
That's good. I like the finessing. And speaking of merchandise, I actually, Zach, you'll be very proud that I have some Overtime gear. So my husband works for Mediacom. Apparently Mediacom does a ton of stuff with Overtime. You'll be happy to know that this has become a part of my pandemic, like 4-piece sport. You know how you like just rotate between like 4 pieces of sweats? And there's like smoothie stains on it all over, which is disgusting now that I've completely disgusted the audience. But I thought you would be very happy to hear about that. But aside from my disgusting sweatshirt, let's talk about overtime, Zach. You guys have been so successful. I think you're up to like 45 million social media followers, registering 1.5 billion video views per month, which is crazy. And at the root of all of this is this partnership, this special relationship that you have with your partner and co-founder, Dan Porter. So unlike the millions of other ideas that never take off, how were you two able to make this one come to life?
Well, first of all, thank you for repping us. Even if it's on a Zoom call at home, it's always appreciated. And I would be lying if I said some of my hoodies don't have smoothie stains on them too. I just have a whole another rack in the back, so I can just switch them out a lot easier. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would say, being on this ride with my co-founder, Dan, has been amazing. It's been one of the most fun parts of building Overtime. As TJ knows, Dan is double my age. So we make for, I think, an interesting and really fun partnership. And I think, I think that helps us honestly manage a really diverse team. We just have different kind of experiences and we're at different points in our life, which I think makes us relatable in different ways. So that's been super fun. But to answer a question of how, how Overtime broke through, I would say a few things. One is, just experimentation. Like in order to get something to work, like you have to just run a lot of experiments and see what works and what doesn't work. A lot of listening. One of my favorite blog posts of all time, this guy, Paul Graham, writes about, do things that don't scale, which sounds actually kind of counterintuitive. It's like, well, you want to build a company that's going to scale. You want to build a multi-billion-dollar company. But by doing things that don't scale, like actually talking to individual customers and fans and saying, hey, what do you like about this? You actually glean a lot of insights that you wouldn't normally get. And so a lot of listening, a lot of kind of hand-to-hand combat. I was in many of these high school gyms very early on, filming myself and talking to athletes and their parents and learning, what this ecosystem really looked like. So I would say those are a couple of the things that really early on helped us break through.
I love it. So fascinating. And what an interesting journey. And TJ, you've had an interesting journey as well. You talked about how you finessed your way into ESPN, although I would like to say that much of it was a lot of your hard work as well. And you also found your way into Twitter as well. So I'd love to hear more about just your story and how important it is to be proactive, regardless of where you are in your professional career.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic question. I'll speak to how I guess my career started. I've always had an obsession in and around sports. And during high school, like many of my friends and colleagues in the space, you always kind of think maybe I might be good enough to do this thing professionally. And I missed way too many layups to know at an early age that if I was going to have a profession in sports, it wasn't going to be on the court and it wasn't going to be. So ended up going to the University of Georgia, and Georgia is a football school. So I'll never forget, college game day rolled into town. It was Georgia versus Auburn. And for those of you who are college football fans, you know that game day starts super early. So their productions start as early as 5, 6 a.m. So I determined that somebody would be there that was a decision maker. Like, this might be my way to meet somebody who works at ESPN who might be able to put me on. So I got there around 5 or 6 a.m. and I just sat in the back and stalked the operation. Like, who's the man who is calling the shots? Who's the decision maker here? And 4 or 5 hours in, I found a moment to approach someone who appeared to be a decision maker. And I was like, hey man, I'm not a creep, but I was standing in the back watching you kind of orchestrate this entire operation. And it was inspiring. And I'd love to know if there's potential internship opportunity that may pop up, or maybe even a job opportunity. He's like, I like your style. I appreciate you shooting your shot. Here's my email address. And shortly thereafter, I landed an internship at ESPN, which turned into full-time employment. And then while at ESPN, we started to incorporate social into our shows, like very intentionally. and Sports Nation was one of them, and Twitter was just a massive, massive component to generating fan engagement on the show. And I started to use the platform a lot. Like, I wondered what hiring looks like. So I went on LinkedIn and I saw an available opportunity in Chicago. I was like, why not shoot my shot? And sure enough, I applied on LinkedIn and I got a call like 36 hours later. And here we are running the sports vertical at Twitter.
I love the way you stalked and finessed your way. I actually worked my way into ESPN by stalking a Duke alum as well. So, I will call it persistence, if you will. And I also just love your story about, finding this opportunity through LinkedIn. And so those opportunities, I think that just proves how proactive you have to be, regardless of whatever avenue you're going to use. So, Zack, I know that you have also finessed your way in so many different opportunities. You're continuing to be bold. You have this new sports league coming out for amateur basketball players, Overtime Elite. And you've talked about how the key to Overtime is talking in the voice of Gen Z and millennials, which I found so interesting, and which is something traditional legacy sports media channels have really struggled to do. So I'm curious, what do you think that means for these traditional sports networks versus the newer platforms that we're seeing today, like Overtime?
Yeah, I think it's a few things. I think it kind of all starts with community, and making, our fans feel like they are a part of something. So whether you're, 33-year-old or 22-year-old, whatever, you're in our demo and you feel like you're a part of something bigger than just yourself. And I think that, millennials and Gen Z, and everyone wants to feel like they're part of something, but I think in particular that this generation really wants to feel that. And, to your point, part of that is talking in their voice and kind of meeting them where they are in the platforms like Twitter, where they are, and it's being very intentional. It's responding to tons of DMs. It's responding in the comments. One of my favorite things that our head of social media, who is just a genius, does is, once in a while he'll put in a caption, like just a string of letters. He's like, oh my God. And then ASDF, just like something crazy that you would text your friend, but the person running a corporate social media account would be like, no, well, that's not in the guidebook. Like, I'm not allowed to do that. Like, I get fired for that. But for us, like, it's just secondhand. Like, that sounds like how my friend would text me. And so I think those are some of the things that we've done, and it's established in our brand. Like, if a legacy media company tried to do that tomorrow, I think most of their audience would be like, what are you doing? And even the younger generation that does potentially follow them, they'd be like, well, that's not really what I expect from this brand. So it kind of has to be built in from the very early days.
So what do you think that means for traditional sports networks and the immediate future?
In the immediate future, they're fine because there is still a gigantic legacy audience, and there's still, a great way to monetize them, and they still have big balance sheets, as seen by the gigantic NFL rights deal that was just signed with a bunch of them. So they're fine for this legacy generation, but I think it's opened an opportunity for the next generation of fans, which is who we serve.
I'd actually dovetail that response, because all too often we have conversations with sports properties and their ask is very simple. They see the amazing work that Zack and Dan and team are doing at Overtime, and they're like, how do we become culturally relevant? Yes, we have this massive machine. Yes, we've got 4 decades of legacy media power behind us, but it's clear that we are coming further and further out of touch with the culture, with the people who actually determine what the dope colorway of a sneaker is, or what the Lil Baby song is talking about, right? And it's fascinating to see traditional media companies start to incorporate ways to get them proximity to the culture. I think of a property like ESPN, right? Bringing over Omar from House of Highlights, like those types of moves we're starting to see a lot more in the industry. So it'll be really interesting to see how that continues to progress. Because one thing is for sure, if you intend to reach sports fans and have them consume your content, you've got to be culturally relevant. You've got to be culturally forward.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that means staying up to trends on whatever it is, whether it's the sneaker culture, sports culture, fashion, whatever it is, lingo, slang. And TJ, I know you've mentioned just how important it is that different communities, the importance of how different communities communicate in different ways. And Twitter is definitely one of those places, and it gives voice to all kinds of voices, which is so awesome. And this platform seems to have really fit who you are, at least it appears that way. So in today's climate, how important do you think it is that a person's values and their authentic self matches those of the corporation that they join with?
Yeah, I can speak for myself, and I realize that for some people, a job is just a job. I don't think that's the case for Zach. I don't think that's the case for Dan. It certainly isn't the case for me or anybody on my team. For one, we love sports. And for two, we understand that sports fans are reflective of all different backgrounds, all different shades, all different shapes, all different sizes. And our platform is a microcosm of that. Our platform isn't homogenous, it isn't a monolith. You've got all types of sports fans, you've got all types of people that join the conversation around sports and any other culturally relevant topic each and every single day. So there are times where I'll have interviews or I'll talk with our inclusion and diversity group, and I'll say, like, there are often times I'm at work sending emails and I've got Twitter open, and there are times while I'm working, I'm engaging with Black Twitter, like while at work. Or there are times like today with the NBA trade deadline, I feel like I'm a part of the NBA Twitter community while sending a strategic and high level email, right? So really, it allows us to sit at this intersectionality of culture, lifestyle, sport, community, and tech, which I think is pretty unique in the marketplace.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you on a personal level too. Everything that I've done in sports and sports broadcasting, and now kind of shifting over into counseling psychology. And my goal is to work with athletes regarding mental health, and also coaches and parents and all that stuff. And I think it's so important that one's career and one's professional journey be an expression kind of who you are. I don't know if that's like a generational trend, but I'm curious, Zach, what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly, you know, digital and real life, like the gap between them, I think, is closed, and I think honestly, COVID has accelerated that because sometimes digital is the only way that you can express yourself to your friends. So certainly, I view it as a really important platform for self-expression. Not for everyone, you know, not. I mean, even me personally, like I'm not posting on social media that much, but I'm intaking a lot. I'm learning a lot about my friends, my family, people in my network. So I think it's very real.
So that expression comes in different ways for each person. And you just talked about how the pandemic has kind of accelerated things. And I always say that as well. It's just so fascinating, especially within the sports media climate, how things have changed in just 12 to 13 months. So I'm curious, from both of your perspectives and from where you are sitting right now, what has been the biggest change, whether it's at Overtime or Twitter or just anything that you're seeing? Zach?
Yeah, I would say, I don't know if it's exactly a change, but I think in a weird way, it's kind of been a doubling down of a lot of the things that we saw happening anyway. Like, you know, and I'll even reference earlier to the conversation of community. Like, when do you need community most? When, you know, you're in quarantine, you know, so I think that, honestly, there hasn't been anything where I'm like, oh, this was completely unexpected because of COVID. It's actually unexpected that the trends have continued the same way despite COVID, is kind of how I would put it.
That's interesting. TJ, what do you think?
Yeah, I similarly, I don't know if this isn't something that we didn't know, but I think it just it showcased even more the value of said community, right? You think about the ubiquity of the audio format now, right? People are at home eating dinner, sending emails, having conversations on their phone with people who they may have never met before, right? And it's becoming a staple within the space. A real special moment for us was Last Dance. So I guess April of 2020. All of us, whether you're a sports fan or not, were just starved for any type of content. So much so that the date of Last Dance was moved up to Super Serve sports fans. And each and every Sunday night, it felt like this amazing watch party across the globe. I'm tweeting alongside Dwayne Wade and Gabrielle Union and LeBron James, all within the same timeline. People discovering things about Michael Jordan that they'd never seen before. And people just really joining the conversation around this really, really special documentary. We, from a Twitter perspective, like, man, like this is just such a special showcase of the value of community and the value of conversation. And that really helps drive a lot of our strategy throughout the pandemic in 2020. We realized that we had a really special opportunity to bridge that gap between live and venue sport and fandom and fan engagement. So a lot of the discussions that we started having with sports properties were more about like, look, you can't have fans in the seats. Here's how we bridge that gap. Here's how we allow fans to experience your property the way they know and love from the comfort of their own homes.
That's so interesting to hear both of your perspectives, thinking that while it accelerated things, that's kind of like a doubling down or just pushed forward a lot of things that were already in place. Where me, I think coming from a traditional sports broadcasting background, I think I saw a tremendous change where a lot of the entities and networks that I had been working for, they were really pushed and their backs were against the wall and they were struggling to find ways to access fans. And a lot of them hadn't created these digital spaces to showcase their content. And so they were really struggling at the last minute to kind of change some things. So I just want to be mindful of our time here. We have over 400 people at this panel, and they are listening to the both of you very, very, very closely. And many of them are undergrad students, which both of you can totally relate to. So the question that I have for both of you is, what kind of advice, professional advice or career, whatever, would you have given yourself, given your 22-year-old self? Zach, I'll let you go first.
I would give myself the same advice I try to give myself every day still, is like, don't stress and worry so much. Because I feel like every single day I have, like, I wake up and I look at my phone and I have like 100 things that mini stresses, and I'm like, they feel like the biggest deal in the world. And I'm going to bed at night and I'm like, none of those are worth stressing about. Like, we're going to be good. Like, if you're the type of person that is motivated and is going to like keep moving the train forward, like, not to stress about so many things. And I would say sort of the inverse advice that I'd give, you know, for people that maybe just have a different mindset, is like the flip side of that is like, you got to move, you got to get stuff done, and and kind of to the point, going back to earlier in the conversation, you have to try things, right? Like the startup that I started in college, like I'm forever, I feel lucky that I was like, I'm just going to take the leap of faith. Like, I'm just going to launch a website and see how it goes. And I didn't have any grand business plan or anything. And I think that taking a leap of faith, choosing the moments to do that and not being too cautious and be willing to take some risks, I think that's a huge component of having success.
When you talk about that stress, are you somebody that is really hard on yourself if you don't achieve a goal in a certain amount of time? I'm just curious what that stress looks like for you.
Very hard on myself for sure. And I think ultimately it comes down to winning and wanting to win as a team. Like, the more people we add to team overtime, like, the more I want to win. I'm like, okay, we're going to war. And it's not, war is like making it seem like it's competitive. It's not always necessarily competitive against another entity or team, but it's like, whether it's the clock or whatever it is, like, we got to do this and we got to do it together. And that's what's fun for me.
TJ, how about you? What kind of advice would you give your 22-year-old self?
Yeah, I would say two things. And I mean, this is changed to a certain degree, but one is be a student of the game, right? We're all sports fans, or we all have aspirations to work in and around the sports space. There are so many resources to know about the sports business. There's Front Office Sports, there's Huddle Up, there's Sports Techie, there's There's so many resources that are available that will pop into your inbox should you want that to be the way that you discover it. Study the game, know the landscape. The beauty of the sports landscape is it evolves each and every day. So there's actually a unique opportunity for you to be a subject matter expert. There wasn't a CEO and founder of Overtime 5 years ago. There wasn't a head of Twitter Sports 5-10 years ago, right? So prepare as if the role that you want exists today, even though it may not. And then secondarily, once you feel like you have studied the game and you've just accumulated as much knowledge as possible, don't be afraid to shoot your shot, right? Because if you have all that knowledge and you have all the connections, but you aren't prepared to ask Zach, hey, do you guys have any internships? Or shoot a note out to TJ, hey, is Twitter hiring? Then you may miss out on an opportunity, right? And the likelihood of you hitting your shot, if you shoot it, is higher than if you don't shoot it at all. So I would say those are two takeaways that I would have for 22-year-old TJ.
TJ, that's the reason you wore that sweatshirt, so you could say that at the end.
Yes, try to bring it back full circle, you know?
Well, you know, we have about a minute and a half left, but I'm going to squeeze it in because I think it's so important because both of you guys are in a position in doing so well and positions and companies that didn't exist not too long ago when you were in school or whatever. So what do you think is the key for a lot of these undergrad students to having that vision so they are prepared for that position when it does open up for them? Zach?
I mean, I think it kind of goes to TJ's point, which is like read, listen, like look for all sort of the signals, but then be ready to be like, okay, I read all these things, but no one is talking about it in this way, or no one is talking about this company. Like, I think that you have to kind of hear all the noise to find the signal, so to speak. But sometimes it's like you have to read what everyone's reading and then find what they're not thinking about.
TJ?
Yeah, I would say that the beauty of Zach's path is he wasn't afraid. Like, so he obviously was aware of opportunities and gaps within the sports landscape. And he was like, all right, I'm just going to bet on myself and build it. In many instances, when you think about like the ecosystem, you see a lot of like overlap, you see a lot of similarities. Overtime identified a gap that existed within the sports landscape. There are certainly opportunities should you study up and should you understand the sports ecosystem. Think about what solutions don't exist. Think about what solves. Think about what blind spots exist within the marketplace that a solve could impact. And I would encourage you to bet on yourself and chart down that path.
Wonderful. Well, Zach and TJ, it has been such a pleasure. We are so grateful to have been a part of your 1000th panel together. And hopefully, I'm sure you guys will have many, many, many more. So
it was a bit special though, for sure.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, it was awesome. Thank you for your insights. And we wish you well. And Caitlin, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Thanks, Prem. TJ, Zach, Prem, that was so much fun. The fastest half hour. But thank you for all that you shared. Zach, I'm glad we're getting you out on a tennis court more often, which is great. And Prim, what you shared about professional journey being an expression of who you are, I think that'll hit home with a lot of people. And TJ, I owe you one because in the mornings on Get Up, when I'm listening, when Dak was doing his deal, they would post the Twitter when Dak's brother would come on and engage with them live. And I realized that you were shaping our experience on traditional networks long before we even knew it was coming. So thank you for all the work you've been doing and just the thoughtfulness you bring to it. It was great to meet you all. Thank you. Prim, great job.